Shield Hero Season 3, Episode 7 is out for the things that the show missed compared to the books, or skipped, or altered, or whatever. And here's just some art you can see in the first part of the book of Rat, who gets introduced to this episode also. Some more art, just kind of the whole gang there. You can see the bow hero lurking in the back. Here's a little bit more. Nice little preview shot of what we get in Episode 8. The first part of these is always just a prologue, and it's really just kind of a recap that Naofumi gives, and it treats it as if you've never read any of the previous books before, so I always skip that. Here's where we actually get into the story, and Naofumi tells the old lady that he wants to start training. And we get a little thing here where you see Naofumi doing training, which obviously they cut a ton of that out of the show just for time. But the old lady who teaches the Hengen Muso style, which is the life force attacks that can go right through Naofumi's defenses regardless of stats, that's all this kind of training is. And she says that Atla can see it better than her, so Atla and Naofumi spar. And Raphtalia was going to go train with the old lady, but then she gets jealous of Atla, so she stays to train and spar with them also. So part of this too is that he's constantly making this life force potion so that he can sense it a little bit faster, because the old lady says it would take like a decade to learn, unless you're a prodigy. So by using the life force potion, he can kind of feel it and like the flow and everything better. So pretty much the training is Naofumi withstanding Atla's attacks just over and over and over. And then once he's exhausted, Raphtalia jumps in, and those two spar with each other because she's also training with the life force. So here's the artwork for it, because obviously they both want Naofumi's attention. Naofumi goes over to visit the old guy, who's his armorer, and he sees Emiya's uncle there, the mole Therianthrope, who's his assistant. So apparently they're doing like a ton of work now because there's two of them. And Naofumi's requesting that Raphtalia get the Siderite shield that Naofumi uses a lot, melted down, and made into a katana that she could use. And this is where they start to sort of reference the old guy having a mentor that he could never quite match his skill. But obviously, he wants to make the katana for Raphtalia. He just is kind of reflecting on how much better his master was than he is at this particular weapon. And just like in the show, this is where we get introduced to Ratatiel and Thea, or Rat. And she's sticking her head in Philo's mouth and inspecting her and just kind of poking and prodding. And she's referred to as an alchemist in this book. I can't remember if that's what they call her in the show or not. But yeah, she's like your total eccentric scientist type, just like you saw. So just like in the show, Naofumi sees the extra caterpillar end, which is the big caterpillar. And the kids try to hide it, and they pull out a whole bunch of eggs, and Kyo refers to Naofumi as a money grubber. You know, the typical kind of shenanigans. So, just like the show, they pull out a bunch of eggs, and Naofumi's like, what were you guys going to do with all this crap? They have this big, long conversation about her goals and how she wants to make new monsters, and Naofumi asks if she could do similar research to the people from Kazuna's world, where they made like smaller versions of their spirit animals. And she was like, no, if someone's already done it, I don't want to do it. And then eventually, they kind of all agree that they could use better monsters in their army to fight the waves, because they use Philo, and she has a ton of value, obviously. And then they also need Philo for transport and all that sort of thing, too. So Naofumi agrees to keep her on as long as she takes the slave crest and can't lie to him, just like everybody else. They keep talking, and Naofumi asks some kind of probing questions, and Rat says that she works the animals just like slaves, and she doesn't believe in discriminating against things just because you feel bad for them. And then Naofumi asks her about the plant, that's the red plant that they use throughout the show, that he's tweaked to turn from like a crazy monster plant into a plant that just provides food for the village. And she says that that would be a piece of cake for her. So she's pretty capable, clearly. And then just like the show, they go through these random crates that they have, and Rat is able to identify the eggs just at a glance. And this is where they find the dragon egg, which is obviously a pretty important plot for a while after this. And also up to this point, Naofumi had been calling Wendy a Valley Girl because he's really bad with names. And that's just one of those jokes that he's really bad with names throughout the entire series and doesn't care to learn people's names or anything, so he just gives them nicknames. So Raphtalia is always like, you better tell him your name before you're stuck with the nickname that he's given you. And I don't remember if she explained this in the show, but this is where Rat explains that dragons don't have any integrity, so any areas where dragons' population increases, you end up with a bunch of half-dragon creatures in no time. They're just out of control. And she also mentions here about the dragon emperors, and that they don't care about race at all. They'll even try to mate with humans. And Wendy gets all mad about this and says that they have manners. But Naofumi doesn't really seem to think it's a big deal because you've seen so many other demi-human types before already. So it carries on pretty much just like the show. We get a little joke in here about Naofumi wanting Raph-chan because he needs to pet her to de-stress. But overall, they hit all the big points. And we get a little bit of stuff in here with Keel and Melty and everybody else laughing at him. And Rat being annoyed that he's whining about it. and she tells him that it'll ignore his commands if he doesn't actually raise the egg itself. It could reject the registration. And we get a good little joke in here that I don't remember being in the show, where Rat asked, what does Naofumi want to do about the gender? And she says that they can influence the gender by adjusting how warm they keep the egg. And then she's like, oh, I guess you probably want a female. And Naofumi gets all pissed off. And we get a good little joke in here when Naofumi looks at Philo and then thinks about what it would be like if the dragon went into heat. So he says male. Then we get a little bit of stuff with Naofumi getting hit on by Sedina and some level updates. How she's already back at 62 and Foal's at 39. Ren figures out that the side effect of his curse is that he can't gain any experience points temporarily. He doesn't really know how long. They talk a bit about Ren and his writing practice, and Naofumi says that he'll send Eclair and the old lady with him to go to the islands back where they ended season 1 because they have those baths that can help get rid of curses. So he's going to try to go do that and then send Eclair and the old lady to protect him. But it's only a 1-day trip by boat. And then we just get a little bit more detail about how Rat used the plants to create the camping plant houses, is what she called them. And they were set to photosynthesize during the day and convert it into magic power at night. So at night, the magic power could be used to have the plants give off light. So they're pretty adaptable and flexible, and she's already kind of getting busy around their little village. And this all happens really fast. Naofumi says that she did all this building with this plant in 2 days, including setting up her own laboratory. So she's definitely been keeping occupied and helping them expand pretty quickly. And you get a little bit here about Windia and Rat getting into it, because Windia wants to have the monsters fight and train, and Rat wants to modify them. So they're both trying to find ways to make the monsters stronger. So then the dragon's born, and we get the whole conversation that you saw in the show, so I'm not going to rehash it, but the show pretty much stuck right to the book for this part, where Galeon's born. They're talking about his abilities and how well everything went and all that, and how much he'll eat, being an omnivore. And here's just a little bit of the book artwork, so you can see that the show pretty much just pulled straight from it. And then Rat asks a little bit about Rafchan, and you see that Naofumi's been plotting to create a new species of Rafchans in this world, since she was created as a Shikigami from the other world, and Raftalia is obviously super bitter. And they kind of get into this big thing about the ethics of it, and Rat's like, they say that the legends are the ones who created the Filolials, and that mutations aren't always a bad thing. And Raftalia is putting him a fight, but Naofumi's just not having it. He's like dead set on creating this species. So just like in the show, they go to the old man's shop, they get the Stardust Blade, and he talks to Emiya's uncle a little bit, and the old man says that digging holes might be a way for them to de-stress, and that if he found a mine, that the mole Therianthropes would probably clean it out for him. So the shield hero says he might take him up on that later. And they mention the mining because he says the old man's stores are like empty. Business has been going so well that they're just running out of material. There's an actual reason to go do it. And as always, Atla is taking shots at Raftalia because she's jealous of her. She says that the weapon seems like it's a little bit different, and an excellent piece of equipment like that would be a waste on Raftalia. We get about a week time jump here of just kind of training and maintaining the village and that sort of thing. And you find out that Galeon reached level 38 in just a week and got a lot bigger. And then we get the whole thing you saw on the show where Atla is in Naofumi's bed when he wakes up, and he explains that the previous time he chased her out, she just slept outside of his door. And then after that, he set her slave curse to punish her, and she still just showed up anyway. So, yeah, she's obviously pretty relentless for Naofumi. And this is where we start nearing the end of the episode, where somebody knocks on Naofumi's door and then runs away. And the next morning, he tries to use their slave crest to see who did it, but then none of their crests activate. So Naofumi catches him, and Philo starts dancing around, and she's like, oh, he's getting scolded. So Naofumi activates her slave crest, or her monster crest, and she's like, ow, master, why me? And Naofumi says, don't laugh at others' misfortune. And Philo says, but master does. And he thinks to himself that she's right, so he deactivates the seal. And then Rat gets mad, and she's like, did you just let her win the argument? Naofumi decides because Philo and Galeon both need attention but don't get along, he's going to alternate playing with them. So he gives Galeon the first day since he's been neglecting him, and they play fetch, like a dog. And we get another little goofy conversation here where Raftalia is encouraging Naofumi to use Galeon to keep Atla out, like a guard dog. And Sedina says that a lot of the children who were traumatized from being slaves have gotten better, so Raftalia should start being able to sleep in Naofumi's room again soon. So he might as well keep Galeon there until then. And then they do the whole thing where they're like, can't we just get Atla to stop? And Sedina is like, no, we did. And Atla said she wanted to marry you. And then Sedina is like, I know. I tried to make it clear to her that you were a loser who wasn't interested in doing anything dirty with a girl. And Naofumi gets mad and calls her a wench. And then Sedina says Atla's reply made it worse because she said it's okay. Mr. Naofumi will lay with me when he's ready. And this is pretty much right where the episode ends, when Galeon's messing around in his room and eats the Emperor Dragon Core. Except in the anime, he flies through the wall, and in the book, he blows the ceiling off the house. And Naofumi tries to use the monster seal, but he just ignores it. And then he smashes into him and flies off. And this is where this one ends. Naofumi is pretty impressed that Galen was able to manage to knock him over. And they covered almost exactly 1/3 of this book with this episode. So they're definitely spreading the pacing out better this season than last season. Because last season they would just skip huge chunks. But obviously there's still just a ton of little details being left out along the way because they just don't have the time. They're trying to jam so many books into these 12 episodes the last couple seasons. So this was definitely one of the better ones as far as sticking to the novel goes. But we'll see. If you're still here, like and subscribe and all that shit. See ya. Thanks.